All right. So anyway, we have here Chris Daddario
Hello.
as my guest on the podcast, and we are going to talk about a great topic today, which relates to how divided our country is. Now, you're only what, 26?
26, yeah.
26. So I'm 60. So I've had a lot more life than you.
Yes.
And in my lifetime, I've never seen the country this divided. In fact, if the country were this divided based upon geographical lines, there might be a civil war. Because remember, in the Civil War, there was a line. You know, it was easy to demark who was going to be on which side. Now, the divide is not only between half the country and half the country, but it's within states. Mm-hmm. So the solution is not a civil war. The solution is to find ways to bring our country back together again, right?
Yes.
And there's this expression that you might not know because you're young, which is, united we stand, divided we fall. And every time our politicians destroy each other on, social media or on debates or wherever, our adversaries throughout the world, I have a friend who used an expression, they're laughing and drinking.
Yeah.
Okay? They're so happy because they want to see us fail,
Yeah.
right? Why wouldn't they? They're our adversaries in the world. We're competing for resources and influence and power and money and happy lifestyles, so they want us to fail. And when they see us so divided, they love it, right?
Yeah, and that's to kind of piggyback off that point. When I'm in other countries, I notice how united they are, for better or for worse.
Yeah, I like the way you said that. For better or for worse, they're on a path, though, together.
Yeah. You could have arguments about what on a moral level, but you notice how there's like harmony within their own country.
Yeah, now, don't get me wrong. If you're in a democracy, if you have freedoms, there's going to be fights,
Yeah.
right? But they're so uncivilized now.
Yes.
It's like they're not debates anymore. In fact, it's not even using facts. It's basically attacking people using brilliant marketing techniques because the human brain adopts stuff that we hear a lot. So if you start saying things a lot, if you create nicknames for your opponents, if you create false statements about what actually happened, eventually a lot of people will believe it because people tend to believe what they want to believe. So if you give them something that they want to believe and you have a platform, if you have a credible platform, you're going to have a lot more influence, right?
Yeah.
So I'm always thinking of ways that we can create more harmony. Again, I'm not saying eliminate debate. I love debate.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is create civility so that we can have debates that are rational and intelligent rather than just screaming at each other and destroying the other side.
Yeah.
Because in destroying the other side, if both parties are doing it, we destroy everybody in leadership, right?
Yeah.
We don't have a nation that people can be proud of because all you ever hear is about how terrible our leaders are.
Yeah.
And if one leader's bashing the other and the other's bashing the first, all of our leaders are being bashed. All of our leaders are being dragged through the mud, so we look terrible on the world stage, and we don't feel good, right? No. And when we're so divided, look, we have an upcoming election with Harris and Trump, right? It doesn't matter who we want, right? We're not even going to discuss that. But here's what I think. Most people on the morning after the election are going to be sad.
Somebody's going to get pissed off.
Well, certainly some are going to be irate because their side didn't win. But most of the people in the middle, even if the person they pulled the lever for wins, they're going to be sad because they're so extreme. There's no more moderates left anymore. Don't get me wrong. There's moderates in the country. There's just not moderates in office, it seems. Yeah. So I was thinking about one way for this podcast today that we could talk about, a way to reduce the tension in the U.S., which is what creates disharmony, right? Needlessly creates disharmony. If it's a legitimate thing that means a lot and it's something that people can agree on in a non-emotional way, great, have the debate. But if it's so emotionally fueled, no one will have a rational discussion and it'll just create anger. So the one thing I'm thinking about is teaching personal ideologies in the classroom, in places like elementary schools and middle schools and even high schools, because this is causing a lot of anger. You look at social media, and there are a zillion videos about teachers who are teaching this or that to children which don't relate to the things that we expect them to relate to in the classroom, right? They're personal ideologies. And what I'm saying is, perhaps one way to reduce the disharmony, the anger and hostility, the divided nature of our country is to simply stop discussing controversial, emotional ideologies in school. And let's think of some obvious ones, right? You have religion. I mean, if you're in a religious school, that's a totally different story. But in public schools, religion, sexual orientation, politics, reproductive rights, gender rights, and controversial culture issues, and anything else that's emotional, controversial, highly controversial, and personal in nature. Because everybody has their own view on personal ideologies, like you do. You and I probably disagree on certain personal ideologies.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I mean, maybe not as many as a lot of others because we spend some time together and we've gotten to know each other, but we probably have disagreements. So why do I think it's important to eliminate ideological discussions from these classrooms? One reason is kids are highly impressionable. Do you know what age your brain is finally developed and ready to be an independent thinker?
25.
25, right? Your prefrontal cortex, which is the judgment center, doesn't form until you're like 25 years old. Elementary school kids are not 25.
They're not 25.
In fact, college kids aren't even 25.
That
In
would
fact,
be
you're
really
just
good.
26.
Yeah.
Your brain just finished
Just
developing.
finished developing, yeah.
Right. One of my daughters believes that her personality is actually now solidified now that she's 25, right? And her brain is formed. She's less erratic, less emotionally charged about things because her brain's fully developed.
And you got hormones just raging up at
my
that
God,
age.
I know.
So, yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So the other thing is, let's keep in mind, teachers sometimes aren't even 25 years old.
Right.
Right? I mean, you graduate from college at what age? 21 or 22? You become a teacher, student teacher, then you're a teacher by 22. Your brain's not even fully developed yet.
Yeah.
Worse yet, teachers are just like everybody else, right?
Yeah.
They don't have any unique experiences in life that make them the ideological gods that should be discussing their own personal views on things, right?
Yeah.
I mean, nobody is. I'm not, and you're not. But here's the thing. Even if they were trained for it, is it the right place?
No.
The classroom.
I mean, I can see your point, essentially, because, it's a distraction to what school is supposed to be. And what school is supposed to be is getting your kids ready for college and then for the real world.
The world.
Yeah.
Right? You have a unique situation, though, because where are you from?
I'm from Thailand.
And what year did you leave Thailand and come to the U.S.?
2018.
2018, and you're 26. So you've spent you were there first 20 years of your life.
Yeah.
All of your education was in Thailand,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you're in undergrad now in the U.S., but all of your secondary and pre-secondary education was in Thailand.
Yeah.
You have a different point of view.
Yeah, and what essentially the difference is, in Thailand, they're going to say, okay, so what basically at fifth grade, they're like, well, you're eventually going to have to get a job. And
In fifth grade?
Yeah, and these are the jobs that makes the most sense in the current economic situation and the culture. Doctors, engineers, computer science. These are your three options that will guarantee you a lucrative or at least the most amount of security.
Right. Probably,
That's what
probably in the U.S. too, right? Probably everywhere.
But this is what they're teaching us,
In fifth grade.
Yeah, it wasn't like, like what you suggest in America where it's all about ideology. It's more so survival.
Yeah, well, wait a second. What's the phrase that you used that they'd say?
Just be a doctor.
Be a doctor.
Be a doctor, yeah.
That's what they're training them as of fifth grade.
Yeah. Which, there's good and bad sides about it, but, I certainly didn't have any,
But and the thing is, here's the thing about all those ideological things that I was mentioning, And again, I'm not weighing in one way or the other or any way on these. Religion, sexual orientation, politics, reproductive rights, gender situations, controversial cultural issues, and other emotional, highly controversial personal matters. Here's the thing is that I have friends who are certain about their point of view, and I have other friends who are equally certain about the opposite point of view. So, I mean, look at reproductive rights. I have friends who are pro-choice. and friends who are pro-life. And when you talk to them, they make, a really compelling case for their side, and they're emotional about it, and they're hard to talk to about it, right?
Yeah.
So now look at a teacher who believes, let's say you have a kindergarten teacher, first grade teacher, second grade teacher, and they're certain about their feelings on one of those controversial emotional issues. What they need to appreciate is they have 20 kids in their class who each have two parents probably, maybe one parent, maybe two parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, who are equally certain about their position on those ideologies, and they may be the complete opposite. And you may say as a teacher, no, but I'm definitely right about this. It's so obvious. How could everyone not agree with me? Well, that's exactly how some parents feel about the other side to it, right?
Yeah.
Politics. Right now it's Trump and Harris. You could throw a stone in any direction and hit somebody who is passionate about one of those two candidates or passionate against one of those two candidates. And they don't want their children to be brainwashed in elementary school to love or hate one side or the other. They don't want to feel, because here's the thing about teachers. What do you know to be the case about teachers when you're dealing with children? They have a lot of authority, right?
Yeah, they do.
It's outsized. It's oversized because they're the teacher.
Yeah.
And, we value teachers in this country, and we tell our children, listen to your teacher. In fact, when I was growing up, that was a common thing. Listen to your teacher.
Well, yeah, in Thailand, we regard them as the second parent.
Yes.
That's the amount of
right?
time you spend with them.
Oh, yeah. In elementary school, they're with our children for 6 hours a day, 7 hours a day, maybe 8 hours a day. And they have a lot of influence. So to have them teaching something that's inconsistent with what the parent may feel is not only counterproductive, but what does it create? Hostility, anger, divide. What does that do to our country? Acrimony, divide, right? It's the exact opposite, and it's needless. It's not necessary because a teacher doesn't have any more ability to teach personal ideologies to their students than the parent of each of those students does to teach personal ideology. And the parents can do so in a more intimate setting, while they're reading to them at night, while they're playing with them on the floor at night. Throughout their lives, they can throw the ball with them. They can take them to dinner, take them to lunch, and talk about things, right? And have rational discussions about these things where teachers are teaching 20 kids at the same time, all their ideology. And I'm not saying all teachers do this, because they certainly don't. We probably see a greater extreme of this on social media than actually exists. But it gets people really angry.
Yeah.
And there's no need for it because what, you and I were talking before we started. What should they be doing? Oh, and before we get to that, I was just thinking of something my mom used to always tell me. She'd say, at the dinner table, you can't discuss religion or politics. And the reason is they're emotional, they're controversial, and they break up families. And you don't want to have your family broken up, so they just stay away from those at the dinner table. They used to, right? Mm-hmm. It's not that you can't talk about these issues. They're fascinating. They're fun to debate about, but they're emotional. And when you mix emotion into it, it's hard to be rational. It's hard to see the other side,
Yeah.
And that's why they stay away from the dinner table. Now you're in school, right?
Yeah.
With children. It's almost obvious that whatever your position is as a teacher on these personal, controversial issues, you should keep them to yourselves and focus on other things, which we don't do enough of. And I just want to ask you, Chris, you did some looking as to who spends the most in the world on education, pre-secondary and secondary. In secondary, I'm saying high school, right? Yeah. Middle school, elementary school.
Yeah, I pull up some numbers, and we spend on average $16,000 to $30,000 per student
on education during those years.
Yeah.
That's not including university, college level.
No, that's
education.
not including university.
So every year that is, right?
Yeah.
Now, where does that rank us in terms of spending?
High, like amongst the highest.
Like the highest. Actually, gross, it's the highest. Per pupil, it's second highest to Luxembourg. Right? Which is a small country.
Yeah.
Right? So we spend the most in the aggregate and the second most per pupil, right?
Yeah.
But where do we rank on things like math and science and reading?
38th out of 71 students.
38th out of 71.
Yeah.
38th out of 71.
Yes.
That's actually kind of funny and sad and surprising, actually.
Yeah.
Like earlier when you told me we're not ranked that well, I thought you were going to say we were ranked like 7th or 8th.
No.
38th out of 71 nations.
Yeah.
And we spend the most, basically.
Yeah, basically.
I mean, again, per pupil, it's a little more in Luxembourg, but we spend the most. See, so that's what I'm getting at is, do we even have time to be teaching personal ideologies in elementary school and middle school and high school when we're 38th on math, science, and reading, right? So I was just writing down some things that I would like to see taught in schools. Math, of course, science, reading, right? Those are big. And writing, kids are terrible writers these days. And because writing is 90% thinking, right? The words on paper are just the output of your thoughts, having a disciplined, creative thought process, right? Mm-hmm. We need to teach more writing. But another big thing, have you considered financial literacy training?
I did that in college.
You did that, right?
Best decision I ever made.
Yeah, because do you know, we have this ridiculous debt, of course.
Yeah.
I think our national debt is $32 trillion. And just to give you a flavor of what that means, ignore GDP for a minute. How much money do we make every year and how much do we spend? So last year, I think we had like $4 trillion in tax revenues. We spent like over $6 trillion in tax revenues in our spending, right? So we owe like $32 trillion. If we generated 30 or 35 trillion a year, I'd be like, ooh, that's a pretty ugly debt, but we could figure out a way to get past it. We could pay it off. Mm-hmm. We could solve the problem. But we don't generate 30 trillion in revenues. We generate like 4 trillion in revenues. And we spend more than we make, which means our debt is increasing every year to the tune of $1 trillion or $2 trillion. So how do you overcome that? And by the way, it spreads down to our personal spending too. It's the same mentality. The government is comprised of what? Individuals, right? They have the same mentality about spending as individuals do. People don't understand money. They don't understand, how to save. They don't understand the rule of 72 and compounding interest. They don't understand how to build wealth for the most part. Neither do our representatives because they're just people, right? But what if we started financial literacy training in kindergarten?
Yeah, the basics.
The basics. I'm not saying
Making fun,
learn
making
about the
it
rule of
fun.
72.
Yeah.
I'm saying starting to slowly understand money and how to build wealth in kindergarten. It's a lifetime pursuit, right? But if you did that by the time they're in high school, they won't have this mentality of building consumer credit card debt. Yeah. They'll understand how to invest for the future and how to, build wealth, right? Yeah. That should be taught.
Be better spenders.
Better spenders, yeah, more efficient spenders, more sensible spenders, right? Yeah. So the other thing is home economics. So when I was a kid, it was called home economics, home ec. It's like the economics of the home. How do you run a household, right? Yeah. And that involves spending. That's a lot to do with money. And also how what your lifestyle is, cooking. Yeah. I don't even really cook that much because in my generation, boys didn't learn how to do it. But these are valuable skills that are life skills we should be learning from a very young age, right? Yeah. And then the other thing I was thinking about is like industrial arts we used to have when I was a kid. I don't know what it's called now, maybe shop. But teaching basic things like how to nail 2 boards together, right? Plumbing, electric. Not to become a plumber or an electrician, but to understand the basics so you can manage your household.
So at least you could diagnose your problems at home.
Yeah, right. Change the filter in your furnace. Yeah. It's so simple, but people don't even know how to do that. The other day I had to clean out my in the sink. It was clogged, and I was going to go get Drano, right? And a friend of mine said, well, hold on, you don't have to get Drano. Just unscrew this, and then stick a coat hanger up there and clean it out. So I did it. It was perfectly clean. I didn't even think of such a thing, right? Because I also grew up in a time where you never learned about that stuff unless you were going into the trades, which I was not, right? So the other thing is, of course, debating and public speaking. When my kids were younger, I used to do this thing called show and tell with them, like 3 nights a week. I have 3 daughters, and I was married at the time, so it's 4 of us, 5 altogether. One of them would stand up in front of us with a thing from their bedroom, and they'd have to basically pitch it to us, tell us why it was so important and how we should like it too. We did that for years, and now they're all good public speakers. But public speaking is the thing that is a great skill to have in life. It's a great life skill, right? That
absolutely.
should be taught starting in
It
kindergarten.
separates you, for
right?
sure.
Totally.
Yeah.
The other thing is entrepreneurship. You know, building your own business. People don't talk about that, but I see like videos of different parts of the world. I just saw this video on these kids in China that were like in kindergarten building a fake business. And I'm not saying China does it better than we do. I'm just saying it's something we should be teaching at a young age. And world history, of course, right? And also nutrition. You know, there's that new book out by Casey Means, which is Good Energy. I've been talking to you about it, right?
Yeah.
No sugar. It's terrible.
Yeah.
But anyway, and what do you have sitting right there? A banana, right?
A banana.
Good for you. But nutrition, we should learn at a very young age to be aware of certain things that we're eating because they're killing us. They're adding cancer to our lives and all kinds of other problems.
Kids are addicted to chicken nuggets and Coke, basically.
Exactly.
Out,
You're right. You're right. Chicken nuggets and Coke. And by the way, if you take chicken nuggets out of that sentence, I was addicted to Coke until 44 days ago when I started this new program. Do you drink a lot of Coke?
I try not to.
Because you know that it's not.
It's not.
healthy.
Yeah. I'm aware of how bad sugar is.
Yeah, and if we started learning that in kindergarten, that'd be a great thing, right?
It took me till 21
to 21, right?
to know about how bad sugar is.
But also fitness. That's another thing is, when I was a kid, we had gym class, and you basically spent a segment on floor hockey, basketball, soccer. All those things were useful back then because we didn't have any other outlets. Now you have travel soccer, travel softball, travel baseball, hockey. Every sport you can think of, you have year-round now. It should be all about fitness. Mm-hmm. Running around the gym maybe, or whatever. Getting steps in, something like that.
Yeah.
But my point is, all those things we should be teaching from kindergarten on. We don't need to spend time teaching personal ideologies of teachers. What's your final thought on that?
I think that I see your point. Obviously, it's hard not to facilitate that because school is a social setting. So kids will probably talk amongst themselves about ideology.
But that's okay, right? Because they don't have the platform.
Yeah.
There's no, unless, you have a social status, right? But they don't have the teacher's platform where you have an outsized opinion.
Yeah, teachers should neutralize it and guide them towards a certain direction. I'm just thinking back to when I was in school and how, by nature there were cliques, with different, you had the GOTS.
And I'm sure that's still going on,
still,
right?
Absolutely. And I'm just trying to think, how do you avoid...
But they have their own peer influence.
Right.
But it's not teacher influence. Now, if teachers weren't human, okay, if they were maybe robots or AI, if they were more, they were better than everybody, right?
Neutralize.
Then you could teach both sides or three sides or four sides of an issue because you don't have emotions in it.
Yeah.
But emotions, even when we want to be neutral, including us, by the way, we're not neutral, right? Because we all have our emotions about something. Yeah. It's deep in our brains. So even if we say, okay, I'm going to teach both sides, there's this thing called a straw man. And you build a straw man for the other side. Like you say, well, I'll make Chris's argument for him. And I make this weak argument that's easy to tear down. Then I make the other side. So I've given both arguments, but I gave yours weak, really intentionally, because I wanted to tear yours down.
Yeah.
Even when we think we're being neutral, it's hard to be neutral.
Yeah.
That's why I say when you're dealing with these controversial, emotional, ideological things, stay out of it.
Yeah.
Let parents deal with it. Now, are parents any better? No, but they're their kids, right? And then they're the ones that have to live with it at home, and maybe it'll create more peace and bring the country more closely together.
Yeah. So, I think the ending is the amount of authority that a teacher possesses. They should use it responsibly and try to be as objective because the consequence of indoctrination or teaching ideology is ultimately harmful and divisive.
It's acrimony and divisive. I like that. I love the way you put that. And I also like the way you said it's with that power comes responsibility.
Yeah.
Right? All right. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. All right.
How many minutes?